Hello, friends, and welcome back to Mysterious Mondays. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I'm reading emails from viewers that had unexplained and disturbing encounters in the deep woods and forested areas. So grab your hiking boots and let's ride. Number 1. Dear Tattooed Biker, I have a story to share. Alright, for context, I am a believer in the paranormal and believe I've had encounters with skinwalkers or something of the sort in the past. I'm also a hunter, fisherman, and general outdoorsman. I've spent countless nights backpacking, camping, hunting, and anything of that kind, so I feel like I have a good understanding of the things that go on in the woods. Also, before anyone comments, I have heard many fox, coyote, and hawk calls. I'm not discounting that this may be what we're hearing, but I firmly doubt it. Anyway, on to the story. One bit more of context. This story takes place in a set of woods, less than a mile away from an abandoned sanatorium with a mass grave on site. This took place while I was camping on the north shore of Lake Superior. I was with 3 of my buddies. The 3 of us were camping, and my other friend were sleeping in his truck about 500 to 600 feet away. We came to the spot after dark and started setting up camp right away, and the animals were acting very weird in my opinion. The deer, which we disturbed from their bedding, were very reluctant to leave, running about 30 to 40 feet away and then stopping, turning around and just staring at us. These deer stayed for hours while we cooked, played music, and generally enjoyed ourselves, and they would one at a time start walking towards our camp. One of these deer would get very close and seem to be very annoyed with our presence, just staring down our headlamps while walking straight at us. Usually deer would get the deer in headlights effect and be stunned, but this one in specific just wouldn't budge. While having lights shined at it, it would walk a straight line right to us, less than 20 feet away, until we would have to run at it to scare it off. This happened 5 to 6 times in the span of about an hour, coming to within about 20 feet away until we had to scare the thing off. Weird, we all thought it was, as we kind of brushed it off and just kept camping. Around 1 a.m., our buddy left for his truck and left the 3 of us out there. My one friend went to lay in his hammock while me and my other buddy stayed up to see what was going on. This is when it got really weird. All night there were eyes surrounding our camp, staying just out of the range of our headlamps, almost 360 degrees around us, staring right into our camp. After a while we got freaked out, and I pulled the sage out of my bag and lit it, walking around the camp with it in my hand. About 5 minutes later, once the initial sage burned out, I looked into the woods and everything was gone. Not one set of eyes were left. We enjoyed the peace and quiet for a while, and we stayed around the fire pit talking. This only lasted for a little while, until we started hearing whistling in the woods. It's around 2 a.m. now, and every couple of minutes we would hear a long, drawn-out whistle coming from nearby. Every time it happened, it would be from a different direction, but still sounded like it was right next to us. We burned more sage and tried to ignore it as it kept happening for the next 45 minutes. We got really creeped out at this point and started being a little more cautious, building the fire a little larger and grasping at our camp knives. Once it hit 3:15, my buddy woke up in his hammock, getting up and asking us what time it was. I checked my watch and told him it was 3:15. My buddy checked his phone and confirmed it. We sit up and start talking around the fire for what seems like an hour. Maybe a little longer, maybe a little less. About an hour passes and my same friend asks us to check the time. We do so, and my watch clearly says 3:05. I'm extremely confused at this point, and before telling him, I ask him to check for himself. He says 3:05 in a very confused manner. This scares the hell out of us, and we decide to start packing up and get what sleep we can in our vehicles. We start packing up on shifts, the two of them packing while I stand watch. After they are done, I start packing my things. About 5 minutes into the process, all of a sudden we stop as we hear this long, drawn-out, shrill scream coming from the woods right next to us. I've never heard anything like this, but it sounded like a young lady in distress. It lasted for about 10 seconds as we all sat quietly and listened. After that, we all just look at each other, wide-eyed and pale-faced. Unanimously, we decide it's time to get the hell out of Dodge. Leaving our things, we all start sprinting towards the vehicles, checking behind us as we ran. We came back for our things once daylight hit and didn't have anything else happen. Believe me or not, it doesn't really affect my opinion on what occurred. Again, I've spent countless nights deep in the woods and I've never experienced anything quite like this. I'd love to hear your opinion on what this was or could have been. I haven't been able to sleep very well since the experience, and I've been very shaken up by the whole thing. Thanks for reading. Signed, Victor. Number 2. Dear TB, I've lived in Appalachia for all of about 4 years of my life, and I'm almost 22 now, and I've never experienced any of the creepy things that people say about the Appalachian Mountains. Until, that is, the story I'm about to tell you. So, toward the end of 2023, 2 of my friends and I had sort of a simultaneous crisis, which eventually led us to get rid of almost all of our belongings, quitting our jobs, leaving our apartments, and living out of our cars traveling around the southeast U.S. Well, on the first night of our big trip, we went to stay with a friend of one of my travel mates. She lives in Tennessee, in the Appalachian Mountains, the Smoky Mountains specifically. She lived on a back road in the middle of the woods. The first night we were there, she had told us that there were strange occurrences on the property. The house was haunted and there was something out in the woods. She had told us that whatever is in the woods likes to hang out around her shed. She said that one night she was walking up to her porch when she got the overwhelming feeling of being watched. Becoming fed up with whatever it was, she screamed something along the lines of, "Go away," at the woods, only for something to scream right back at her. She claimed to have seen it one night from her kitchen window. She said the thing was peeking around the shed, staring at her. It wasn't an animal, but it wasn't a human either. Out of curiosity, I asked her to describe whatever she saw in more detail, but she flatly refused. I, being the skeptic that I am, basically disregarded everything she said and just forgot about it. Now, because it was our first night on the trip and it was so fun and new to us, we wanted to sleep in our cars, which were parked right in front of the shed that I mentioned earlier. Yes, that shed. We hadn't yet made the window covers, so we're sleeping in 3 SUVs with uncovered windows completely surrounding us. But I had no issue with this. I thought the worst that could happen would be that I'd wake up with a bear staring me down. So I went to bed peacefully and woke up in the middle of the night, really needing to urinate. I got half dressed, put on my shoes, left my car, and walked to the edge of the woods to do my business. Got back in my car and went to sleep. No uneasy feelings, no feeling of being watched, nothing. The next night, I once again woke up, really needing to relieve myself. So just like I did the night before, I sat up in bed and put on my pants, got my shoes ready, and reached for the door handle. But for some reason, I just couldn't do it. It was like every hair on my body was standing on end, and I got this overwhelming feeling of dread and foreboding. Now, I had a makeshift bed in the back of my SUV, on top of all the back seats that I flipped down. So I'm sitting there in my bed, looking around through all of my uncovered windows. I can't see anything outside, except, that is, for the faint outline of the trees and the glints off my travel mates' cars. I neither saw nor heard anything that should be putting me on edge. I reached for the door handle again, but I once again got that terrible feeling. I continued to look around, tried to reach for the door, and withdrew my hand. I finally gave up and said screw it, and just went into an empty water bottle. The next morning, I got up and was talking to my travel mates, and one of them mentioned waking up in the middle of the night out of nowhere and experiencing an overwhelming fear in being watched. She sat up in her makeshift bed and looked all around, only to see nothing. I can't lie, when she said that, I got a bit of a knot in my stomach. I asked her what time it was when it happened, and she estimated that it was around the same time that I woke up, nearly 3 a.m. I then told both of them about my experience, and we were all a little freaked out about it. When we were headed out to our cars the following night, we noticed that all the homeowners' mini outdoor cats were all sitting on her front porch, which we hadn't even seen in the last 2 nights. Previously, they would all be scattered around the property, if they were even in sight. We thought it was weird, but we didn't think too much of it. We all climbed into our cars and said our goodnights on our walkie-talkies. It was a pretty warm and muggy night for October, so we all had our battery-powered fans running. One of my friends reported that her walkie was dying. Then my other friend reported that their fan died. And then my walkie started dying. And it continued until, within 5 minutes, all of our electronic camping gear had all died. Finding this incredibly creepy, we all decided that we would just sleep in the house, to be better safe than sorry. We were gathering up our things to move inside when I hear what sounded like something large walking through leaves in the woods. I kept stopping what I was doing and looking over at my friends who were standing right by the woods. They seemed unbothered every time, so I would just continue what I was doing. That was when I heard a louder noise coming from the woods and finally decided to walk over. Turns out one of them was standing watch while the other one gathered the rest of her things. Me and my friend stood there, watching the other friend's back, and it kept sounding like whatever was in the woods was getting closer to us. Soon enough, my friend had gathered her things, and we calmly but quickly went into the house. From what I can remember, we slept in the house the following night as well, but the night after that, one of my friends borrowed some sage from the homeowner and saged all along the wood line and around our vehicles before we got ready for bed. We slept perfectly fine for that night and every night after. No more weird feelings, noises, nothing. Of course, we were pretty much perpetually on edge from that point on, but it was never quite the same feeling of fear and foreboding that I'd felt before. To be honest, I don't know what to make of all of it. I know I didn't see anything, but the feeling I got was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. That was my first and only time in my life where I've had that feeling, especially just out of nowhere. I've told the story a few times now, and I've had people tell me that it was just a bear. But I don't think a bear would give me that sort of instinctual feeling of danger when I can't even hear or see it. And I'm fully aware that I may be biased now, but I've lent a bit more credibility to the homeowner's stories after my experience. For those of you curious, no, we still aren't on the trip. Unfortunately, the whole thing went downhill after a few months, and we are now integrating back into society. We are, however, all still friends, and no, we didn't experience anything like this again, despite staying at several campgrounds in the middle of the woods in other parts of the Southeast. Thanks for reading. Signed, Anonymous. Number 3. HeyTB. This happened back in 2018. My girlfriend and I decided to hike the Appalachian Trail in Virginia. We had hiked other parts of the trail north of Virginia, but had never gone this far south. The section we took ran through George Washington and Jefferson National Forest from Roanoke County to Giles County. It is one of the most remote parts of the trail, which is exactly what we were looking for. We gathered our gear and made our way to the Virginia Creeper Trail to begin our journey. It was early October, and the air was crisp and cool. Perfect hiking weather with beautiful scenery. The majority of the trip was pretty uneventful, just like your typical hike, but our last few nights is where things got strange. On this portion of the trail, you're supposed to camp on the trail, or at least at a designated shelter. We didn't really want to run into other people, and didn't want anyone coming up on us in the middle of the night, so we decided to ignore those suggestions and find our own little spot somewhere off the trail. After a little searching around, we found a spot a little ways from the middle of a small clearing, and we set up camp, cooked some food, talked for a while, then snuggled up and went to sleep for the night. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I was awakened by my girlfriend, shaking me awake, telling me to get my gun, that someone was outside and walking around the tent. She told me that she woke up to what sounded like someone right outside the tent running something sharp along the side while circling us. When hiking, I carry a .45 automatic, because you just never know who exactly or what exactly you might run into when out in the woods. I got the gun out of my pack and we sat silently, listening for any sounds. After a while, we heard snapping and crunching sounds of someone or something walking in the woods behind our tent. I got the flashlight and silently made my way out. Our fire had gone out, so it was nearly pitch black. I told my girlfriend to stay put while I checked it out. I didn't flick the flashlight on right away. I waited till I heard more noises. After a few minutes, the sounds, I could tell, were bipedal. I turned on the flashlight and flooded the area with light. I thought I saw someone move behind a tree. I yelled out and told them to go away, and that I was armed. I kept the light on the area with my gun drawn, and slowly approached the area where I had seen the figure. Then, from my right, I heard what sounded like someone running away through the woods. I spin and face my light that way, and then from the original spot, I hear who or whatever was there take off into the woods. There's no way I'm giving chase, so I return to the campsite. I end up sitting guard outside the tent in the darkness until daybreak. The next morning, I looked around a bit for signs of who or whatever it was, and I discovered a large footprint in some moist dirt not far from our tent. It was a human-type print, but I couldn't make out any detail. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't my girl's. This freaked me out as it confirmed that someone, perhaps more than one, was stalking around our tent. I kept it to myself because I didn't want to freak her out any further than she already was. At that point, we were pretty deep in and still had 2 days left. When it came time to set up camp, I found a spot near a cliff where we could place the tent in a small overhang and prevent anyone from coming up behind us. The whole day up to this point, I had a feeling that we were being followed. I had no confirmation of this, as I hadn't seen or heard anyone else, but it was just a gut feeling. We set up camp and made some food, then retreated to the tent. I kept the gun right next to me, and I assured her that if I slept at all, it would be with one eye open. After a while, she drifted off to sleep, and I stayed awake, listening to the sounds of the woods at night. I was awake for a few hours, just waiting to see if anything was going to happen, and at some point I drifted off. I awoke sometime later to what sounded like someone going through our stuff outside the tent. I grabbed my gun and woke my girlfriend. From the faint glow of the fire, I could see someone silhouette against a tree. There was really someone out there. I yelled out to them that I was armed. They stopped what they were doing and quickly bolted. I came out of the tent, gun drawn and ready to shoot. Our things were scattered everywhere. I walked to the edge of the woods in the direction of whoever was out there had fled. There was a creek nearby, and I walked to the edge, where there was a small trail running alongside it. Down the creek, I could see a light. It looked like a lantern, because it was flickering. And then I saw 3 more emerge from the other side of the woods. I told my girlfriend to start packing up whatever she could, and that we were leaving now. We packed up everything of value, left the tent and a few other items, and headed back onto the trail in the middle of the night. I kept hearing people talking off in the woods, and hearing branches snap for quite some ways. I kept looking behind us every few seconds to make sure no one was coming up on us. It was completely nerve-wracking. If something happened, we were still a long way from anywhere, and quite literally on our own, since we hadn't seen another hiker the entire time we'd been out there. I really felt as if we were in serious danger. We had been hiking for quite some time when I heard something in the woods behind us. As we rounded a corner, I turned around and saw someone step out onto the trail and just stand there, staring at us. It was just as the sun was coming up and barely any light. I couldn't make out any features, just the silhouette. I stopped and looked at them for a second and asked them who they were and what they wanted. They just stood there, silently watching us, and then turned and walked back into the woods. We picked up the pace and kept going, looking back ever so often. We didn't see them again, but my gut told me they were there for quite a ways. We eventually reached the end of the trail and got to where we had parked my girlfriend's car, totally exhausted. We made it out of the Virginia woods without becoming a victim of whoever or whatever was following us. Thanks for letting me share. Signed, Andy. And there you have it. 3 disturbing experiences from viewers in the deep woods. What'd you think about these experiences? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Just remember to keep it respectful. I feel many of these submitters will read the comments, and some were already traumatized from their experience. And if you have an unexplained encounter or brush with the unknown and would like to share your story, please send it to the email in the description. And your experience just may end up in a future video. Anyway, thanks again for watching. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker.